I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. And today I'm with Karine Elsen from Avalara. And Karine, do you want to just give a little background on what you do at Avalara before we begin?
Yes, hi. I am the VP of Partner Marketing at Avalara. So what it means is Avalara is a partner-led company. And the role of partner marketing is really to work with our partners and build and execute co-marketing plans. So that is what my team's responsible for. And I'm very pleased to lead that team here.
Great. Well, so glad to have you on the podcast. And so this podcast is really just about your life story. So let's just start from the beginning and where you grew up and what your parents did for a living. We can start there.
Yeah, so I grew up in Belgium, and it's sort of sheer coincidence. My first job out of college was a tech company, and it was a very interesting experience. I worked for a software distributor at the time. It was a small European company, but we had Microsoft's big contract for Europe. And it was very attractive for US companies to break into the European market. So early on, we were bought by Ingram Micro, and they expanded the company into many countries. So I got to really experience, working in France and Italy and opening offices all over Europe. So I very much enjoy that. In terms of my parents and my background, my father was a real outdoorsman. My grandfather was actually a farmer. So I really enjoyed that a lot. In the summer, we used to hang out on the farm, play in the barn. It was just a great experience as a child. And my mother was a bookkeeper, so they were quite different, as you can imagine, a farmer and a bookkeeper. Although my father himself never really worked as a farmer, but at heart, he really was. So
what did he do? What was his job?
He was an engineer. So
okay.
Working as an engineer. I have, 3 siblings. It's hard for me to say that because I just had a sister who passed away. So I had 2 sisters and a brother. I had a really great childhood.
So when you talk about your parents, they were in Belgium. So how long were you in Belgium for?
I was in Belgium. I moved to the US in my late 20s. I think I was about 27 when I moved. Yes. It's funny, though, because when I was 16, I still remember the day. At one point, I came home from school and I said to my mom, Mom, you should know that I'm never going to marry a Belgian man because they're boring. And I'm not going to stay here because this country is too small for me. So I kind of knew at that time already that I was going to spread my wings and go somewhere else. And I actually had a plan because I was like, you know what, I'm going to date different nationalities and see what I like. I had a Spanish boyfriend. I had an Italian boyfriend. I ended up almost being engaged to a German. And then I went to complete opposite. And ended up marrying an Irishman, because I know there are stereotypes, so I have to be careful not to generalize, but Irish people love breaking rules.
Yeah.
And German people love following rules. So it was quite the extreme, but it was the right choice.
So does your family still live in Belgium?
Yes, everyone
Oh,
still lives in Belgium. And Belgians, there's an expression, let's see if this translates in English, they have a brick in their stomach, right? They're very homey, they stay very close to their family. And all my cousins, my uncles, aunts, they live within like 5 miles of where they were born. So all the families are very close together. And I'm truly the exception.
sounds like where I live in Ohio.
Yeah, it's very close knit, and
Yeah,
like, oh
Midwestern.
my God,
Yeah.
how do you do that? You're leaving your family, but
So so tell me, so you said it at 16, but at what point did you feel different, or what actually hit you that you knew you wanted to go beyond living in Belgium? Like, was there a moment or something you saw or
well, I
someone?
was really, it was when I had my first job. And as I said, when we were acquired by Ingram Micro, and I thought, wow, I really want to go to the US. And um, I was talking to them. They had an exchange program where you could go, just 1 year and live in Santa Ana. And so I was already talking to them about doing that, and we were sort of, starting the process of, how does that work? And then one night, sheer coincidence, I met my now husband in a bar. I mean, Belgian and Irishman, the chance that they meet in a bar is probably higher. And so he started to talk about how he was applying for a job in Washington D.C. I was like, okay, we kind of started dating, but I always had this in the back of my head that he was going to move soon. But it took a while, right? The organization that he applied for, where he applied, had a very long process.
Mm-hmm.
So we really started to see each other more. And then after a couple of months, when he got the job, he said to me, he said, why wouldn't you come? Come with me. And I said to myself, yeah, why not? Right. I mean, I can, if it doesn't work, I mean, it's not like I can't go back. It's worth trying.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I made the decision to say, you know what, I'm selling my car, I'm giving up my job. It was a big leap of faith
Yeah.
because, we were not married, right? And it's not that easy to work in the US when you don't have a green card and you don't have a permit. So I had to actually get very creative around that. In the beginning, what I did was I set myself up as a consultant in Europe, and I found companies in the US that really needed help with doing business in Europe. I knew a lot about distribution, of course, because I worked for a distributor, a tech distributor. And I found this one company that was really about to launch their product in Europe. And so I interviewed with them and I explained my situation, and I said, that's fine. We can pay you in Belgium. So we set that up. And then I was very lucky. That year, it was the first year that the US did a lottery program for certain countries. And the way it worked was that you could apply. You needed to send in a letter. You needed to show proof of residence. You couldn't have a criminal record. There were obviously some key requirements, but they picked like the first 60,000 people. And then you had to go through a process and you could get a green card. And so the first year it was easier than the following years because anyone could send as many letters as you wanted. And I sent like 250 copies, and I mailed them from different locations to increase my chances of winning. And that's how I got the green card. There were 17 million letters, and I was one of those 60,000 that they picked. So that was the start of what I would call a great sort of ride here in the US. I was hired by the company, and then I became responsible for international marketing. And sort of that was really important, right? Because I needed to be working, and I certainly wasn't going to get married to get a sort of a work visa. So I worked out, and yeah, it's been great since then.
So with your family being, very much about the community that they live in and their way of life, being young, was there anything like when you were a child that just didn't resonate with you, or
Yeah.
did you feel different?
Yeah, I have to say, I went to a very strict Catholic school,
Mhm.
and my sisters were really good students. They were, they worked hard. They were always doing their homework, and they were just keeping their heads down and doing what they're supposed to do. And I just wasn't. And I remember the nuns would say to me, they would always say, "We can't believe that you are Annie and Magda's sister," and they were just really, they struggled with me because I was like, I wasn't making my homework. I was not following the rules.
And why was that?
I don't know. I was just wired that way.
Yeah.
I was the youngest, right? So I think
Yeah.
when you have four, my parents had 4 kids in 5 years, and I think by the fourth, they were sort of like,
I'm exhausted.
we're kind of a little done here, and I sort of did my own thing, but I was always as a child sort of like I thought school was pretty boring. I didn't like the fact that they told us exactly what we should be thinking, and yeah, it was really not working very well for me.
And what did your parents say about it?
I remember one time, this was probably in high school, and my mom came back from a parent teacher conference, and she was in tears, and because they said I was a bad spirit, and that's when I kind of realized, but by that time, I was 17, and I thought, I remember that because I felt bad about it. And then when I went to college, my father was very smart. He took me aside. He said, "You'll never amount to anything. You're never going to be able to succeed in college. You don't know how to work. It's just not going to work." And I was so mad that he said that. And I left and I thought, I'll show you. I am going to show you what I can do. And that first year, I really worked really hard. I was always studying, and I had like the best grades, And then, but he knew what he had to say to motivate me. So that was, I remember that.
Did you ever talk about it with him?
Yeah, oh yeah. He because I used to, when my mother was working, and he was home earlier. And when I was in high school, I would be studying. I would just be lying on my bed like that and have like the book on the bed. And he's like, "You can't study like that, He's like, "You got to sit at the desk. You got to write things down." I'm like, no, I know it. Remember that 2 days later, I came home and I was like, I flunked, So he kind of knew very well how to handle me. It was,
yeah. And so you got better grades for that, but did you also resonate being in college differently than you did in high school? Like,
yeah, I have to say in college, I certainly had fun, but I do think something clicked then, and I was a lot more about, this matters now because this is going to determine my future. Mm-hmm. And it was really at that time that I started to really think, look, I have to get this together. I have to get a degree. I have to start thinking about what I want to do. I became very focused on that. And so my first degree was languages, so interpretation and translation. And I came out of that and I thought, what am I really going to do with this? Translations, I kind of realized that with my temperament, that's a very lonely job, right? Because you take a book and you have to translate it. And so I thought, I want to be doing things where I can interact with people.
Yeah.
And so I set myself up as a language teacher because Belgium has 3 official languages, and you really need to make sure that you are well versed in all three, or at least French and Dutch. So Belgium is very much split, right? Half of the country speaks Dutch and half of the country speaks French. Well, they have to learn the other language. And so a lot of companies would kind of do training for their employees to get better in the other language at lunchtime, and executives. So I set up my own little business and I started to teach executives, and I had customers like insurance companies where I would go at lunchtime and I would teach their employees. And I did that. I mean, in fact, it worked really well because I was making really good money for someone, like a year out of college.
Mm-hmm.
But then I thought, well, this is all great, but there's no progression, right? There's no career progression. I can't asking more money just because I've been doing it. And that's when I went back to school and learned marketing, and got an MBA in marketing in Brussels in French, because I thought, well, because I'm Flemish, right? And I went to high school in Flemish. I said, if I can get this MBA in French, that's going to set me up to be able to get a job in marketing. And that's how I ended up in a technology company as a product marketing manager.
So what was it like when you came over to the US, like from living where you lived?
Yeah, that's been a very interesting journey, I will say. I felt like you really go through three distinct stages when you make such a move, right? Because you're giving up your job. I mean, for me, it was all at once, because new continent, not even a new country. I mean, you're going across the ocean, and with someone that I barely knew. We were together for 6 months, so I had to kind of build a new relationship. And work-wise, I had to do all of it, right? A new job. So it's very, you feel like, I would say, in the beginning, right, you feel very uprooted. And it certainly impacts your confidence, because people behave differently. You're not sure what's up or down. I tell you a funny story that sort of exemplifies it a bit. Is like, so one of the first weeks in this new company in the US, I came back from work, and my husband, or not my boyfriend at the time, says, "Oh, how's it going?" I'm like, "Well, it's going fine, but it's exhausting. Everyone is asking how I'm doing." He goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I walk down the hall in the kitchen and everyone is like, how are you doing? How are you doing?" And I'm starting to explain, and he's laughing, and he goes, "You're not supposed to answer that." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "It's not, they don't know, they don't want to know how you're doing. You just have to say, oh, good," or
it is crazy.
But those are little things. You're like, right. I was starting to talk about, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm not doing well. And he's like, "Don't answer that." So the first stage, I felt like you just feel uprooted, right? You're learning everything's new, and you're sort of an outsider. You do feel like, I'm not belonging in this group.
Right.
And you don't pick up on subtleties, idiosyncrasies. You miss kind of cues, because, right, I remember that very vividly. And then the second stage of that is you're sort of in between two chairs. You're not quite like, this is my home. But then when you go back to Belgium, you also sort of say, well, this is no longer my home either, right? You feel like you're in between the two. And then you sort of, now I feel like I am very fond of Belgium. I love to go back, but this is my home, right? My kids are born here. I have my life here now, almost 30 years. And I feel like this is now my home, right? Mm-hmm. But it takes time, especially also with language. Even though my English was good, you think in your own language and you translate. And it takes a while before you start really thinking and dreaming in English, right? So all that takes time.
Yeah.
But I really learned, that through that. And one of the big takeaways that I've learned is you just have to stay true to who you are, right? I am different. I'm actually, and I will say when, in conversations when they ask, oh, where are you from? I will immediately say I'm Belgian. I'm still Belgian.
Right.
Even though I have a US passport now, I'm a US citizen, I consider myself as Belgian. And I've sort of learned, you just have to stay who you are. You don't have to fit into a different mold. You don't have to fit into what you believe it needs to be here. And, it's taken me time to really have that level of confidence. I remember there was one time where a manager, I was asking about a promotion. And she said to me, oh, Karine, I need you to be more like, and she named one of my peers who had been promoted. And I was so hurtful, right? Because you never want to hear that someone says to you, you need to be someone else to get to the next level. And so these moments have been sort of when have really made me just much stronger in who I am and what I want to be.
Yeah. And I think, your inner soul's about breaking the rules.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And so, how did you then navigate that in the corporate world? Because the corporate world does have a culture that they expect people to fall in line with. And those kinds of comments can be soul crushing, and so how do you still succeed and be who you are?
Yeah. And, and you probably can tell, right? I'm very straightforward. I'm very outspoken. And I'm often the person who says what other people are thinking, but they're not saying it. I will say it. And I've had to work on that because sometimes, that is not always the smartest thing to do. But I think it's also appreciated that there are people like me who are not afraid to just say what they think. But yes, I've had that feedback when it came to performance reviews, that I needed to make sure that my message was adapted to my audience. And especially when you're dealing with higher level executives, you have to be thoughtful about how you deliver what you want to say. And certainly that is something that I've obviously learned over time, to be a bit more political about certain things as well. That's just the nature of the beast, right?
Right. So maybe you can talk about that process. So what do you think you do to still remain yourself, but make sure the message is heard by your audience, whether that be staff that work for you or people above you?
Yeah, I've been really working on listening more, and just if you have thoughts and you feel passionate about something, being smart about when you insert yourself and when you don't, right? So maybe when I was, younger and more inexperienced, I would just say a lot more. And now I'm much more careful about when to insert myself and what statement to make.
Right.
So that you balance your listening a lot better, because sometimes you're so keen on, I need to say this, they need to hear this, that you're not really following the conversation. So I really focus more on listening now. And certainly I still state what I want to say, but I am much more thoughtful about it than I used to be.
Yeah.
And I think that has more impact.
I have found just getting older. So, I think, and it's good for young professionals to hear too, is that you can be really passionate about what you do. And, you have all these goals of what you want to accomplish, but you can get in your own way as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
And it's harder when you're younger because you so badly want the next thing and or feel a certain way. I think it's a really hard thing. I always think about wrapping my head around because I'm watching my son right now in college and he's so passionate about what he's doing. And he just formed this club and he's an environmental engineer, but found business people and they formed this whole club to really spread the message and make an impact in corporations about sustainability. And I went and worked with these kids last week because they need help, like putting a strategy together. So I told my son I'd go help. And I have to tell you, I left there feeling like so energized because of their passion. And they didn't have, I consult all the time, but all the people that get in their own way too, being older, where they're like, I've done that before, I've tried this, or that doesn't work, or having all these preconceived notions. And then you're with younger people that are like trying to be a sponge and take it all in and just be like, oh my, and then you see them actually do it. And you're like, if only you could like cut through this older. So there's something between like the two sides of it, because you do get beaten down as you go up the ranks and
they have no baggage, right?
Yeah. But they're still like excited about the opportunity, not knowing all the things that are going to get in their way of, doing that. And so it's just, if you can like, it's just an interesting thing because I've been thinking about it since being with them last week, that how much, you really don't say as much anymore because you're like, is it worth the energy?
I know. It's, but you still have to you can't lose. I can't stand when people say, oh, we've done this before. It doesn't.
Right.
I'm like,
soul crushing.
Yeah, that doesn't fly, right? You still have to, if you lose the passion, you can't think outside the box or you can't figure things out. That's a big, that's something that I really struggle with. Like, I'm all about, problem solving and optimism and positivity.
Right.
So that's, which, you need that in corporate America because there are a lot of headwinds and there's a lot of things that we've had to deal with. And you have to maintain positivity. And we all have our days where you just want to say, oh God, why am I doing this? But, I get over that very quickly.
Yeah. And so how do you go about getting over that? Because some people hold on to it. So what's your process of
it's a very simple sort of mantra that I have. I hate being miserable. I mean, I like being in a happy state. And it's like, right? So if you start going down the path of, oh, this doesn't work and this and that, you become miserable. And I don't want to be miserable. Right. I want to be, and ultimately, I'm responsible for my own mental state and my own happiness. So then I'm like, okay, get up the next day and just, be a happy person.
Exactly.
Move forward. That's how I get it. That's how I am. I can't just be sitting in a corner and being miserable, That's
so what is the mantra that you go to on that? You said I have a mantra.
Yeah, I sort of say to myself, right? I mean, don't be miserable. Just
don't be
pick up where just move on. And I'm very much a driver, right? I have a lot of energy. I mean, I have a lot. This is one thing we haven't talked about is I was a gymnast when I was a kid. So from the age, and my father actually was a gymnast, and he took me to gymnastics when I was 6, and I started really getting into it to the point where I was doing it 10 hours a week, and I was doing competition. That was my life, right? From the age from 6 to 16, I was doing gymnastics, and I was always like doing cartwheels. My mother said, you spend more time upside down in the sofa because I was all into headstands. And because my body is just used to that. I mean,
Right.
when you instill that early on, your body craves it. And so I've always done a lot of like working out, dance, gymnastics. Now I play a lot of tennis. I do Legree, which I'm not sure you're familiar. Legree is like a harder form of Pilates. It's with a lot of resistance. I do a lot of yoga. I love yoga. I've discovered yoga like 25 years ago. I go on yoga retreats. Yoga is like important because as you get older and you build strength, you just that flexibility. And it does wonders for me. That's also what I do is when I have a bad day, I just sign up for an early morning yoga class, and it makes a big difference, So yeah, I'm very active physically, and it gives me a lot of energy, and I bring that energy into my work.
Yeah. I also interviewed Melissa Pritchard from Avalara, and
Okay.
she was at the Olympic training for gymnastics.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so you guys will have to talk about that.
Yeah. I wasn't that good, but
Yeah, but she actually lived there.
that's
So
amazing.
I know, and she went to college on a full scholarship with it. So yeah,
Oh, awesome.
it's
Yeah.
funny how how lives intersect. So
Yeah. No, I do believe that um, the physical energy and physical activity is so good for your mental state. It really it makes a big difference.
yeah, I totally agree. And I was thinking when you were going through those stages you went through being an immigrant and moving here, it's very similar to grieving anything. Like I was just talking to I run these courses to help accounting firms really transform their client advisory practice. And one of them just sold their tax practice. And as excited as they are that they did it, there's like the next day of like, who am I, without my practice? And I was talking to her about that because when I sold mine, you think you're going to be so happy and you're actually you're grieving. It's like something you created and it was how you defined yourself, where you lived, and you, like you said, that you had confidence living there. And then there's this whole transition of who you become. But if you never leave one thing, there's no way to create the next great thing, and create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I actually believe that there are, you make incremental changes, but I think that there are real crossroads in your life where you're sort of called to make a bigger change and reinvent yourself.
Right.
And, we just did that 3 years ago, right before the pandemic. We lived in Washington, D.C., and we just said, we've been here long enough, seen everything there is to see. A lot of Washington, D.C. is very transient, right? There's a lot of international people coming and going. A lot of our friends had left. My kids were, on their own. And so we said, let's move. And we moved to Austin. And, we joined a country club. We started playing tennis, and it just reinvigorating. And then I got a new job, new people. I need that. I need these moments in my life where you're like, okay, things have to really change, not something small. I don't think everyone's wired that way, but that's what I did in my 20s. And I'm like, it seems to be every 25 years, I need to make a major change.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's true. And it's good to know that about yourself. And I think, it's true of personalities in business or whatever you do, just being honest with yourself. Am I the visionary person? Am I the person that likes change versus the people that like the maintenance, the things that are the same every day, that's dependable? Change is very disruptive.
Yeah.
And as a leader, I would just ask you, because I'm sure there's people that work for you that aren't like you.
Right.
So how do you handle someone that doesn't like to be shaken up or have change happen and bring them on the journey with you?
Yeah. I've learned that you have to kind of figure out what is holding them back, right? And I think what I've learned is that sometimes people just are afraid of making mistakes.
Right.
Or what if I do something different and I make a mistake? And so the first thing I try to say is, mistakes are okay, right? And I always say, look, there's no mistake we can't fix. I mean, It's not like, we're not surgeons, operating on someone who might die. Let's put it in perspective here, right? If you're going to make a mistake, I'm sure it's something we can easily recover from, or we can recover from together. So that's one barrier that I try to remove is like, it's okay to make mistakes. And I always say too, I say, in my mind, failure is not trying something and it doesn't work. Failure is keep doing the same thing and hoping for a better outcome. So I really try to encourage people that not changing in the environment that we're in as a company or as a person, that is not going to work anymore, right? Look at what's happening in the industry, in the world. Change is a constant. If there's one constant right now, it is change. Mm-hmm. And so it just making them feel safe in trying new things, in making these. And some people are bolder than others. Some people are going to do it in small increments, in small steps. But I really send a message saying, doing the same thing, that's not going to get you anywhere anymore.
Right.
So
well, awesome. So many great tidbits that we've talked about. I like to end with some rapid fire questions. So I'd like you to pick a category. So family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
I'll pick family and friends.
Okay. Things or actions that I don't have that I want to have.
It is hard to be so far away from family, and all my best friends do, because we moved. I've got 3 really good friends. One is in Florida, one is in New York, in Belgium. They're all over the place, and I wish they were closer, of course.
Yeah. Things or actions I do have that I want to keep.
Well, yeah. I mean, my family, and we have great relationships, of course, and we have no family drama, and so I'm fine with. I don't need more friends. I'm really good with the friends that I have. I just make an investment, right? I travel to them. I make sure that we keep these friendships going, because if you don't invest, then that can change quickly.
Yeah. Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want with my family and friends.
There's no drama. Really, I can't stand any drama or situations that I get pulled into. And there's very little, thank God, more on my husband's side. He shouldn't hear that. His family is a bit more drama, but we have no drama. I mean, we have great relationships, and I think too, because we're so straightforward. Mm-hmm. There's no one talks behind anyone's back. It's all like out in the open.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
what I want to keep.
And then last one, things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
I have a lot of guilt, of course, being far away, especially when you have something dramatic happening in your family, or your parents are getting older and you have to rely on your siblings to take care of them. I feel a lot of guilt about leaving.
In
these kind of situations.
Yeah. And I'm sure with the loss of your sister that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I'm sorry. So is there anything from today's conversation that you'd like to end with, some, a message that you wanted to emphasize, or anything we didn't talk about that you want to make sure people take away?
No, I mean, I would just, I'm a big believer. I have a great sense of fun, and I really think that, we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. And I really also communicate that with my team or my family. It's, you got to have fun doing what you're doing. And as I said, I really don't take myself too seriously. What I mean is, like, I have perspective on things. That's really and just staying true to yourself and not trying to be anything else or not trying to figure out what people want you to be. Just be yourself and be more of yourself. Become more of it. I'm a big, I don't know if you Marcus Buckingham. I always tell my team to read his books, right? He's all about your strengths. Don't even try to the old it was like, oh, you got to work on your weaknesses. No. You have to build on your strengths.
Yeah. Find the other people that fill your gaps.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to do this. I really appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.